Tom Cruise surprises a fan with $500,000 after a car accident, not knowing his wife just left him. The last thing Ethan Lee expected when his car flipped on the icy road was to be saved by none other than Tom Cruise. But that's exactly what happened. As he lay trapped in his wrecked vehicle, blood mixing with the snow, all he could hear was the shrieking of sirens and the crunch of tires skidding toward him. The pain was unbearable, his legs pinned beneath the dashboard, and his breath shallow. Ethan had no idea how he had gotten to this point. He'd been driving home after a long day of work when a sudden snowstorm had turned the roads into a deadly hazard. The storm had come out of nowhere, catching him off guard. His car had skidded on the ice, spun out of control, and hit a tree. But as the adrenaline faded and his vision blurred, it wasn't just the paramedics who arrived on the scene. A familiar voice cut through the chaos. "Hey, hang in there, man. We've got you." Ethan's mind struggled to focus, but he was sure his ears weren't deceiving him. He blinked, squinting through the cracked windshield as a figure approached. Someone with short brown hair and a big, confident smile. It was Tom Cruise. Ethan's heart raced. Was he dreaming? Tom was kneeling beside the wrecked car now, talking to Ethan in calm, reassuring tones. "You're gonna be all right. Just stay with me. Okay. Help is coming." The shock was too much for Ethan to process. His head swam as the pain intensified. He tried to speak but couldn't get the words out. "Stay with me," Tom urged again, his hand gently holding Ethan's, trying to keep him conscious. "Help is almost here. Just breathe, buddy." Somehow, amidst the storm and the sirens, Tom Cruise had stopped. He'd been on his way to a movie set, but had seen the wreck, pulled over, and rushed to Ethan's aid without a second thought. The star had made sure the paramedics got to Ethan right away. But as they pulled him from the car and into an ambulance, Tom remained at the scene, watching, making sure everything was being handled. It wasn't until Ethan was safely at the hospital, patched up and groggy from painkillers, that he learned the full truth of what had happened. Tom Cruise had stayed with him the entire time, even following the ambulance to make sure he was all right. The next morning, when Ethan was just starting to process the craziness of the previous day, he received a call. His hospital room was dim, the sun barely peeking through the blinds, when his phone rang. He was expecting a call from his mom, or maybe a friend, but when he looked at the screen, it was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello," he answered, his voice hoarse. "Ethan Lee." The voice on the other end was smooth, professional, but with an unmistakable warmth. "This is Tom Cruise." For a moment, Ethan thought his mind was playing tricks on him. But it was really him, Tom Cruise, the voice that had comforted him in his darkest hour. "Tom Cruise?" Ethan said, still in disbelief. What's going on?" "I just wanted to check in on you," Tom said. "I know it was a pretty crazy situation yesterday, and I wanted to make sure you're doing okay. You were pretty shaken up." "I can't believe you're calling me," Ethan stammered, still trying to process. "I don't know what to say. I don't even remember half of what happened." "No need to thank me," Tom replied with a chuckle. "I just did what anyone would have done. But I do have a proposition for you, Ethan. If you're up for it, I'd like to help you out a bit." Ethan's mind was spinning. Help him out? What could Tom Cruise possibly mean by that? "I don't know what you've been through, but I know the accident wasn't just hard physically," Tom continued. "I've heard about the situation with your job, your bills, and the car repairs. I don't want you to worry about any of that anymore. I'd like to help." Ethan couldn't even begin to grasp the words. Was Tom Cruise offering him money? A stranger, a celebrity, just offering to help with his financial struggles? "Tom, I don't know what to say." Ethan managed to mumble, his voice trembling. "You don't have to do this. I don't need." "I insist," Tom interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "I've seen what you're going through, and I just want to do what I can to help. I'm not doing this because I want anything in return. Just think of it as a gift, a way to help you get back on your feet." Ethan's mind was spinning. He couldn't even begin to process this. This was insane, but there was no mistaking it. The star on the other end of the line was serious. Tom Cruise wanted to give him $500,000. Ethan was speechless. This was too much, far too much. But then, in the back of his mind, a new thought began to form. His wife, Sarah, had just left him. Their relationship had been on rocky ground for months, but the accident had pushed things over the edge. She hadn't been there for him, not even once. Now, in the middle of his most confusing moment, Ethan was about to accept an enormous offer from someone who didn't even know him. Tom Cruise was offering him $500,000. But at that moment, all Ethan could think about was how alone he felt. Before he could respond to Tom, his phone buzzed again. It was a text message from Sarah. "We need to talk." Ethan's heart sank. He put the phone down on his chest, his mind racing. Would this call be the beginning of something that would change his life forever? Or would it be the final sign of how much his life had fallen apart? Ethan stared at the text from Sarah, his heart pounding. "We need to talk." It wasn't like her to send such a vague, ominous message. She had left him just a few days ago, taking only a few of her things. The silence that followed had been suffocating. Ethan didn't know if she was coming back, or if this was it. He hadn't expected to hear from her so soon, especially after everything that had happened with the accident. He was still on the phone with Tom Cruise, who had patiently waited through the awkward silence. Tom's voice came through again, pulling Ethan from his thoughts. "Hey, Ethan, you still there?" Tom's tone was calm, almost as if he hadn't just made an offer that could change Ethan's life. "Yeah, I'm here," Ethan replied, his voice tight. He didn't know how to explain what was going on in his head. He was grateful for Tom's kindness, but the timing couldn't have been worse. He felt pulled in two directions, one toward a celebrity offering him a life-changing sum of money, and the other toward the wreckage of his personal life. His wife had left him, and now he was in the hospital, recovering from a car accident. How had things gotten this bad? "Listen, Ethan," Tom continued, as if sensing his hesitation. "I know this is a lot to take in. You don't have to make any decisions right away, but I really think you deserve a fresh start, you know. You've been through a lot, and I want to help you get back on your feet." Ethan's chest tightened. He was touched by Tom's words, but everything felt so surreal. A celebrity, the Tom Cruise, was offering him a lifeline, and he couldn't even manage to hold on to his marriage. "Thanks, Tom. Really," Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I appreciate it more than you know, but I need to think this through. A lot is happening right now." There was a brief pause before Tom spoke again, his voice warmer now. "Take all the time you need. Just know that the offer stands. If you need anything at all, I'm here." No strings attached. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. What kind of person would refuse such an offer? But then, he couldn't shake the thought of Sarah. The text message was still sitting on his phone, unanswered. He glanced down at it again. "We need to talk." Was this about their marriage? Or was she just checking in? What was left to talk about? Sarah had made it clear that she was done, that she couldn't deal with the way things had been spiraling in their relationship. But Ethan didn't want to give up on them. Maybe this money could fix more than just his financial troubles. His hand shook as he typed a reply. "Can we talk later? I'm still in the hospital." He hit send and waited. As he stared at the screen, he wondered if he was doing the right thing. What if Sarah didn't want to hear from him at all? What if this was the end of everything? The phone buzzed in his hand again. This time, it was Sarah's reply. "Okay, but we need to talk soon. About everything." Ethan rubbed his temples. His head was pounding from the pressure of the decision in front of him. His life had been thrown into chaos, and now it seemed like everything was crashing down at once. A divorce, a near-death experience, and now the chance to take $500,000 from Tom Cruise. Before he could process it further, a nurse entered the room with a cheerful smile. "Good morning, Mr. Lee. How are we feeling today?" Better, I guess," Ethan muttered, though the pain in his leg was still sharp. He looked at the nurse, trying to focus on something other than the mess of his life. "Is there anything I need to do today? Any tests or anything?" "Just a few routine checks," she said as she approached the bed. "You'll be able to leave in a day or two. You're healing pretty quickly." Ethan nodded absently. He was still thinking about the call with Tom and Sarah's message. The nurse went about her work, adjusting the IV drip and checking the monitors. When she was finished, she smiled again and left the room. But the questions remained in Ethan's mind. What was he supposed to do now? He had been so focused on getting through the accident, he hadn't really thought about the consequences of everything that had happened. Tom Cruise, a man he had never met before, was offering him an unbelievable sum of money. But that would come with expectations, wouldn't it? Nothing in life came for free. What was Tom's angle? The more Ethan thought about it, the more questions he had. What did Tom really want? Why was he helping a complete stranger? And if Ethan accepted the money, would it make him feel better? Or would it just serve to complicate everything even further? His phone buzzed again, and this time, it was a call. He didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. It was Tom. "Hey, Ethan, it's me again." Tom's voice sounded in his ear. "I just wanted to make sure you're doing okay. How are you holding up?" Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm okay. Just trying to figure things out. There's a lot going on right now." "I get it," Tom said, his voice warm but understanding. "If you want to take some time to think about it, that's totally fine. But just remember, I'm here if you need someone to talk to. No rush." The kindness in Tom's voice made Ethan feel even more conflicted. On the one hand, it was comforting to know that someone cared, someone who wasn't tied to the messy parts of his life. But on the other hand, it just didn't seem real. Tom Cruise, offering him money, offering him a chance at a fresh start. Was it too good to be true? Just as he was about to respond, the door to his room opened again, and a doctor stepped in. The doctor was looking at a clipboard, his expression serious. Ethan immediately tensed. He wasn't in the mood for bad news. "We need to run some additional tests," the doctor said, glancing up at Ethan. "We've noticed some complications with your leg. It's healing slower than expected." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice low. "What kind of complications?" "We're not sure yet," the doctor replied. "But we want to make sure there's no internal damage. I'll let the nurse know to prep you for an MRI." Ethan's mind started to race again. Just when he thought things were starting to settle, his body was throwing up more problems. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a slow breath. What else could go wrong? As the doctor left, Ethan was left to wonder whether he would be able to accept the offer from Tom Cruise. If things with his leg didn't improve, what if he couldn't work again? What if this injury meant more trouble down the line? His thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of his phone again. This time, it wasn't Tom or Sarah. It was a news notification that made his stomach drop further. The headline read, "Tom Cruise surprises car accident victim with $500,000. But what's behind the gesture?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What had Tom gotten himself into now? And what was this story going to mean for him? Ethan's hand shook as he read the headline. "Tom Cruise surprises car accident victim with $500,000. But what's behind the gesture?" He stared at the words for a long time, his mind racing. He had only just received the offer from Tom, and now the world was about to know about it. How had this news gotten out so fast? He hadn't told anyone yet, and as far as he knew, Tom hadn't either. Could this be part of Tom's plan all along? Or was the media getting ahead of the story? Ethan felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. The idea of his personal life being splashed across the media wasn't something he ever wanted. His accident was bad enough, but now, to have a celebrity like Tom Cruise involved, his name on headlines for all the world to see, it felt like his life was spiraling out of control even more. He couldn't help but think that maybe this offer wasn't just a kind gesture. Maybe there was more to it. Maybe Tom wanted something in return. As the weight of this new development settled on him, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Sarah. "Can you call me? It's urgent." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had been putting off the conversation with her, but now it seemed unavoidable. What did she want? Would she mention the divorce? Or was this just a continuation of the uneasy tension that had been building for months? He quickly typed back, "I'm in the hospital. Can we talk later?" Seconds passed before Sarah replied, "Fine, but you should know. I saw the news." Ethan's heart sank. It was one thing for the media to catch wind of his accident, but now Sarah was involved too. He could almost hear her voice in his head, filled with frustration and hurt. "What did you do?" he imagined her asking. "Taking money from Tom Cruise? Are you serious?" The idea of her seeing him as weak, as someone who couldn't even handle his own life, filled him with dread. He couldn't risk that. He had already lost her once, and now, with the media spotlight on him, would this just make things worse? The door to his room opened again, and this time, it was a nurse with a warm smile. "Mr. Lee, the MRI is ready. We'll get you in right away." Ethan nodded, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled deep inside him. He couldn't afford to worry about the press or Sarah right now. He needed to focus on his health, his leg, his recovery. Everything else could wait. The nurse helped him into a wheelchair and wheeled him down the sterile hallway. As they moved past rooms filled with patients recovering from surgeries, Ethan couldn't help but feel out of place. This wasn't where he had planned to be. He'd have been so focused on his job, his future, and his marriage that he had never imagined a day where he'd be sitting in a hospital bed, dealing with an injury that might change everything. And now, to add Tom Cruise into the mix? It all felt like some bizarre, twisted dream. They reached the MRI room, and the nurse helped him onto the cold, metal bed. "We'll need you to stay as still as possible for the scan," she said as she adjusted the machine. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to relax as the machine hummed to life. The sound was deafening, a constant whirring and clicking that only seemed to amplify his thoughts. He tried to focus on the sound of the machine, hoping it would drown out the noise in his mind. But it didn't work. His thoughts were all over the place. Tom Cruise, $500,000. Sarah, the divorce. He kept replaying his conversation with Tom, trying to make sense of it all. What was Tom really offering? Was it just generosity? Or was there a hidden agenda? The nurse's voice broke through his thoughts. "Almost done, Mr. Lee. Just a few more minutes." Ethan nodded absently, but as he lay there, he felt a strange sense of guilt wash over him. He hadn't asked for Tom's help, hadn't even known it was coming. But now, the more he thought about it, the more he felt like he was being pulled into something bigger than himself, something he didn't understand. The MRI finished, and the nurse helped him back into the wheelchair. As they wheeled him back to his room, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He hadn't even realized he had been holding it until he looked down and saw that it was another text from Sarah. "I can't believe you're doing this. This is not you, Evan. This isn't who I married." Ethan's throat tightened. He hadn't even realized how deeply Sarah's words would cut. He knew things had been bad between them, but he never thought she would react like this. "What do you want from me?" he typed, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want it, but I'm trying to get through this. I'm just trying to survive." Seconds later, her reply came. "I just wanted you to make it through without falling apart. But this, I don't know what to think anymore." Ethan dropped his phone onto the bed. He felt a tightness in his chest, a knot that wouldn't go away. Sarah had been his everything, and now she was slipping away, piece by piece. No amount of money, no amount of help from Tom Cruise could fix that. The nurse returned and gently knocked on the door. "Mr. Lee, the doctor is here to speak with you about your test results." Ethan nodded, feeling the wave of exhaustion hit him. He wasn't sure if it was the pain, the emotional turmoil, or just the weight of everything crashing down all at once, but he was drained. The doctor walked in, holding a folder. His expression was serious, but not overly concerned. "Good news and bad news, Mr. Lee," the doctor began. "The MRI didn't show any major damage to your leg, but there's a significant amount of swelling. We need to keep you here for a few more days to monitor it." Ethan let out a sigh of relief. The injury wasn't as bad as he had feared, but the uncertainty of the situation still hung over him. Would he be able to return to his normal life anytime soon? Or was this the start of a long recovery process? "We'll also need to start physical therapy soon to avoid any long-term issues," the doctor continued. "But you should be able to get back on your feet eventually." Ethan nodded, grateful for the good news, but still feeling lost. The thought of being stuck in a hospital for days more was almost too much. But it wasn't just the physical recovery that weighed on him. His whole life had been thrown into chaos, and no matter how much Tom Cruise wanted to help him financially, it couldn't fix the cracks that were forming everywhere else. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. His stomach churned as he hesitated, then answered. "Ethan Lee." A voice on the other end said, crisp and professional. "This is a representative from Tom Cruise's team. We'd like to discuss the next steps regarding the financial support he's offering you. Would now be a good time?" Ethan froze. Was this real? Was this truly happening? Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the voice on the other end of the line spoke again, the calm tone of the representative somehow making everything feel even more surreal. "Ethan Lee, this is Jessica from Tom Cruise's team. I'm calling to discuss the details of the support Mr. Cruise is offering you following your accident. Are you available to talk now?" Ethan had no idea how to respond. The shock of hearing from Tom Cruise's team felt like it had knocked the wind out of him. A celebrity, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, wanted to help him. And now, here was someone calling him on behalf of Tom, making everything seem so real. Yeah, I guess," Ethan said, his voice a little unsteady as he sat up straighter in his hospital bed. He tried to focus on what Jessica was saying, but his mind was racing. What next steps? What did that even mean? Great, Jessica continued. Tom has arranged a sum of $500,000 to assist you in getting your life back on track, as we discussed. We'd like to go over how that will be handled. Would you prefer a direct transfer, or would you rather speak with our financial advisor to make sure the money is properly allocated? Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. It wasn't the money that troubled him. It was everything that came with it. Tom Cruise wasn't some distant stranger offering a casual gift. This felt like a well-thought-out arrangement. There had to be paperwork, a plan, a catch. I don't really know how to handle something like this, Ethan mumbled, rubbing his temples. The room felt too small. The weight of the decision pressing on him was overwhelming. I wasn't expecting any of this, and I'm still figuring things out. Jessica's tone softened, almost as if she understood the confusion Ethan was feeling. Of course, we understand this is a big decision. Mr. Cruise only wants to help, no strings attached. He's asked for nothing in return. Ethan's mind swirled with doubt. No strings attached. That didn't make sense. It had to be more complicated than that. There was no way someone like Tom Cruise, someone with so much to lose, would just hand over $500,000 without expecting something in return, even if it wasn't immediate. So, what does that mean, exactly? Ethan asked, trying to steady his voice. Is there any contract or something? Jessica didn't hesitate. There's no contract, just a commitment from Mr. Cruise to help you get through this difficult time. The money is yours to use however you need it. Medical bills, living expenses, therapy, whatever you decide. We simply want to make sure you're on your feet as quickly as possible. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. The idea of Tom's help sounded simple enough, but the reality felt much more complicated. Could he really accept this kind of generosity without feeling indebted? Could he take this money without worrying about some kind of unwritten obligation? Before he could respond, the door to his room opened again. This time, it was the doctor, carrying a clipboard and looking at Ethan with a neutral expression. We'll need to monitor your leg for a few more hours, Mr. Lee, the doctor said, glancing at the nurse behind him. But you should be able to go home tomorrow. Ethan nodded absent-mindedly, still distracted by the conversation with Jessica. He wasn't really listening to the doctor. His mind was still reeling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I'll check back in shortly, the doctor added, then turned and left the room. Ethan could hear Jessica still talking on the phone, but his thoughts were consumed by the news that Tom Cruise had arranged this incredible offer for him. How did he even begin to process something like this? Was he really going to let himself be helped by someone so famous, someone so out of his world? Ethan? Jessica's voice broke through his thoughts again, this time more gently. I know this is overwhelming, but please take your time. If you need anything else, just let me know. We're here to make this process as easy as possible for you. Ethan finally sighed, realizing he had been silent for too long. Thanks. I'll think about it. I just need a little time. Take all the time you need, she said, her voice kind but professional. Mr. Cruise will be in touch with you soon. And remember, there are no strings attached. Just help. The line went dead with a soft click. Ethan sat back in his bed, staring at his phone in disbelief. No strings attached. It felt too good to be true. And yet, the money was real. There was no question that the offer was genuine. But what did it mean for him? Would accepting it change his life in ways he couldn't predict? Was this just a simple act of charity, or was there more to it than he could see? Ethan's thoughts were interrupted once again by another text message from Sarah. We need to talk. I can't keep doing this. Ethan's pulse quickened. What did that mean? He had already been avoiding this conversation, and now Sarah was bringing it up again. She wanted to talk, but what if this was the final conversation? What if she didn't want him back? What if the money was just another wedge in their already strained relationship? He reached for his phone, fingers trembling. He had to respond to her. He couldn't keep avoiding the inevitable. He typed a quick reply. I'm still at the hospital. Can we talk tomorrow? The reply came almost instantly. Fine, but tomorrow. This is it, Ethan. The words hit Ethan like a punch in the gut. This is it. What did she mean by that? Was this truly the end? He tossed his phone onto the bed, feeling helpless. Everything was falling apart. His marriage, his health, his future. And now, With Tom Cruise's help hanging in the balance, he didn't know where to turn. Was accepting the money a step toward rebuilding his life? Or was it just another mistake? As the sun dipped below the horizon, the hospital room grew dim. Ethan stared out the window, trying to make sense of the chaos swirling in his mind. The past few days had been a whirlwind, and he still wasn't sure if he was making the right choices. But one thing was certain. Tomorrow would be a turning point. He would have to face Sarah, face the reality of his marriage, and face the decision that could change his life forever. And as he lay back on the hospital bed, trying to gather his thoughts, he heard a soft knock at the door. The nurse stepped inside, holding the clipboard. "Mr. Lee, I'm afraid we're going to need to keep you here for the night. The doctor wants to monitor your condition one last time." Ethan nodded, unable to muster the energy to argue. "Okay." The nurse left the room, and Ethan was left alone once again with his thoughts. He felt like he was caught in a storm, unable to find his way out. There were too many things to consider, too many things that could go wrong. And the hardest part of all, he wasn't sure who he could trust, not even himself. The night dragged on in a haze of confusion. Ethan couldn't sleep, his mind too restless to quiet. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah's text. "This is it, Ethan." The words echoed in his head, spinning like a broken record. What had happened to their marriage? Was there any chance of fixing things, or had it all truly ended? And then there was the matter of Tom's offer. The money, the help, the potential future. But that felt just as complicated. He sat up in bed, staring at the ceiling. How did I get here? The accident had been a wake-up call. He had almost lost everything in a blink of an eye. And now, as he looked at the $500,000 offer from Tom Cruise, he realized that life had thrown him a curveball he wasn't ready for. His phone buzzed again, and this time, it was Sarah. "I'll be there at 10 a.m. We need to talk face to face." Ethan sighed deeply. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this conversation. The last few months had been a blur, arguments, silence, miscommunication. And now, as Sarah agreed to meet him, it felt like the final chapter of their relationship was about to be written. He stared at the phone in his hand, feeling both dread and a strange sense of relief. Maybe they would talk, and maybe things could be fixed. Or maybe she would tell him that it was over for good. At 10 a.m., the hospital room door opened, and Sarah walked in. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying, but she still looked beautiful, even in the sterile hospital setting. Ethan's heart sank when he saw her face. She wasn't the same woman he had fallen in love with. There was a distance in her eyes now, a hardness that hadn't been there before. "Ethan," Sarah said softly, taking a seat at the edge of the bed. "How are you feeling?" Ethan swallowed, unsure of how to start. "Better, I guess. They say I'll be out of here soon." He paused, studying her face. "How are you?" Sarah's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've been thinking a lot, Ethan. About everything." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. This was the conversation he had been avoiding. The one where everything had to be laid out on the table. "I saw the news," she said, her voice quieter now, almost like she was trying to choose her words carefully. "The whole thing with Tom Cruise. And I don't know what to think anymore." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Here it comes. He could feel the tension rising between them. The silence was heavy, thick with unspoken words. He wasn't ready to explain why Tom Cruise had gotten involved in his life, but he knew that he had no choice. "Sarah, it's not like what you think," Ethan began, his voice cracking. "Tom offered to help me. He didn't. He didn't expect anything in return. It's just an offer. That's all. You're telling me this guy, Tom Cruise, just decided out of nowhere to give you $500,000? Sarah raised an eyebrow, skepticism lacing her voice. "And you're okay with that?" Ethan could feel his chest tighten. "I didn't ask for it. It's just, I don't know what else to do. I'm stuck, Sarah. I'm stuck with the accident, with my leg, with everything falling apart." And then he just offered help. I didn't know what to say. Sarah exhaled sharply. "I don't know, Ed. I don't know what's real anymore. We've been through so much, and now you're telling me that Tom Cruise is going to swoop in and fix everything." Ethan winced at the bitterness in her voice. He knew how she felt. He felt it too. But how could he explain that Tom wasn't just some stranger offering charity? He was a lifeline, a chance to put his life back together, even if it seemed too good to be true. "I didn't ask for it, Sarah," Ethan said again, his voice quieter now. "But it's there. It's real, and I don't know what to do with it. Sarah looked away for a moment, her eyes scanning the hospital room as if looking for answers. When she turned back to him, her expression had softened, but the tension remained. "And then there's us," she said, almost in a whisper. "What about us, Ethan? Do you even want to fix things?" Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. This was it, the question he had been dreading. Could he fix things with Sarah? Could he somehow make her believe that he wasn't just a failure? He had to be honest with her. "I do," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I've always wanted to fix things, Sarah. I didn't know how." Sarah's eyes searched his face, trying to read him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Ethan could hear the hum of the machines in the background, the soft beeping of the heart monitor, but it all felt distant now. There was only Sarah and him, the two of them, standing at the crossroads of their future. Finally, Sarah sighed. "I don't know if we can fix this, Ethan. It's not just about money or your leg or whatever else is happening. It's about us, and I don't know if we can get back to where we were." Ethan's stomach dropped. He had known it, deep down, but hearing her say it out loud felt like a punch to the gut. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her. He couldn't bear the thought of this being the end. "I can't lose you, Sarah," he said, his voice breaking. "I know I messed up, but I don't want to give up on us." Sarah closed her eyes, tears threatening to spill over. "I don't know if I can keep going, Evan. I'm scared. We've been through so much, and it's just hard." The silence that followed felt unbearable. Ethan wanted to reach out, to pull her close, and tell her that they could work through it, that he would do anything to fix what was broken, but he didn't know if she would believe him. "I don't know what's going to happen," Sarah whispered, "but I need time, Ethan, time to figure things out." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had hoped for more. He had hoped for a solution, for a way to put everything back together. But it wasn't that simple. Nothing was ever that simple. As Sarah stood to leave, she paused at the door, her hand resting on the knob. "I'll be in touch," she said quietly. "But for now, I think we both need some space." Ethan watched as she left, the door clicking shut behind her. The room felt colder now, emptier. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of the end. But in the silence that followed, his phone buzzed again. It was a text from Jessica at Tom Cruise's team. "Mr. Cruise would like to check in with you soon. Are you available to discuss the next steps?" Ethan stared at the message for a long time, the weight of it settling in. He didn't know what to say, or if he even wanted to discuss the next steps. It felt like his life was being pulled in so many different directions, and he couldn't see a way out. The only thing he was sure of now was that everything was about to change. How that change would unfold, he had no idea. Ethan stared at his phone for what felt like an eternity, the message from Jessica still glaring at him on the screen. "Mr. Cruise would like to check in with you soon. Are you available to discuss the next steps?" A part of him wanted to ignore it, to turn off his phone and bury his head in the hospital pillow. But another part of him, the part that had been clinging to the hope that Tom's offer could somehow fix everything, knew he had to respond. This was the moment that could change his life. The money, the help, the chance to start fresh, it was all so overwhelming. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind of the emotional whirlwind he had just experienced with Sarah. She had left him hanging, torn between wanting to fix things and needing space. The uncertainty was like a weight pressing on his chest, but he couldn't afford to ignore Tom Cruise's team. His life wasn't just on pause. It had already taken a sharp turn, and he had to decide whether he was going to grab hold of it or let it spin out of control. Ethan quickly typed back a response. "Yes, I'm available. Let's talk." Within moments, his phone rang. It was Jessica again. "Mr. Lee," she greeted him, her voice calm, but there was an underlying urgency in it. "Thank you for getting back to me so quickly. We've been in touch with the financial advisors, and we'd like to move forward with the support Mr. Cruise has arranged for you. We understand the situation you're in, and we want to make this as easy and seamless as possible." Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't want to feel like a charity case, but that's exactly how he felt. There was no escaping it. Tom Cruise was offering him an incredible amount of money. He couldn't keep pretending it wasn't a huge deal. "I appreciate it," Ethan said, his voice a little hoarse. "But can you just tell me how this works? What exactly does Mr. Cruise want from me?" There was a brief pause on the other end. "Mr. Cruise doesn't want anything from you, Mr. Lee. He's simply trying to help you recover from a difficult time in your life. He's offering this support as a way of ensuring you can focus on healing, both physically and emotionally, without the added stress of financial burden. Ethan shook his head, feeling conflicted. It's just a lot. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I wasn't expecting anything like this. I didn't ask for any of it. Jessica's tone softened. We understand. This is a big decision, and we want you to feel comfortable with it. But please understand, Mr. Cruz is only offering this because he believes it will make a real difference for you. There are no hidden strings, no obligations. This is about your recovery. What you choose to do with it is entirely up to you. Ethan leaned back in his bed, trying to wrap his mind around the offer. He couldn't help but wonder what Tom Cruise would expect from him in the future. No strings. That didn't make sense. How could someone so powerful, so successful, just give away $500,000 without any kind of expectation? Okay, Ethan said slowly, trying to sound more assured than he felt. So what's the next step? How do we move forward? We've already started the process, Mr. Lee, Jessica explained. A financial advisor will be in touch with you shortly to discuss how the funds will be distributed. It will cover everything, from your medical bills to your living expenses, and anything else you need during your recovery. You'll have access to it immediately. We'll make sure everything is handled smoothly, with no complications. Ethan's head spun. He had never been good at handling money, at least not this much money. The thought of having so many resources available to him was overwhelming. How was he supposed to use this money in a way that didn't feel like a burden? How was he supposed to be grateful when all he felt was guilt? I just don't know what to do with all of this, Ethan admitted, his voice shaky. It's a lot to take in. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this kind of help. Jessica paused, then said gently, Mr. Lee, you don't have to make any immediate decisions. Take your time. But please know that Tom's offer isn't just about the money. It's about giving you the tools to get back on your feet. We're here to help you every step of the way. Ethan closed his eyes, his mind reeling. Tools to get back on my feet. Was this a lifeline or a trap? I'll think about it, Ethan said quietly. I'll talk to the financial advisor, but I need some time to process everything. Of course, Jessica replied. Take all the time you need, Mr. Lee. We'll be in touch soon. The call ended, and Ethan was left alone with his thoughts. He had never been so uncertain in his life. Could he really take this money? Could he accept help from someone like Tom Cruise without feeling like he owed him something? Or was this truly a pure act of kindness? A chance to rebuild his life without any strings attached? His phone buzzed again, and this time it was a message from his sister, Katie. You're not alone in this, Ethan. You've got family who loves you. Whatever you decide, we're here. Ethan smiled a little. Katie had always been there for him, even when things were at their worst. Maybe he could lean on her for advice. She was the only one who hadn't judged him in the last few months, the only one who still believed in him. He quickly typed back, Thanks, Katie. I really need to talk to you about everything. I don't know what to do. But before he could send the message, his phone rang once more. It was the financial advisor from Tom Cruise's team. Hello, Mr. Lee. This is James from Mr. Cruise's office. I understand you've been in contact with Jessica, and I wanted to walk you through the details of the financial assistance that's been arranged for you. Ethan hesitated, then answered, Okay, sure. The conversation that followed was a blur of numbers and formalities. James explained how the funds would be distributed, how they would be used to cover medical bills, physical therapy, and living expenses. Ethan barely processed any of it, his mind still stuck on the same question. What does Tom want from me? At the end of the call, James asked if Ethan had any questions, but Ethan simply thanked him and hung up. His head was spinning with the weight of it all. The money was one thing. The way his life had been turned upside down in such a short time was something else entirely. He glanced at the clock. It was almost noon. Sarah had left, and he had hours to think things through before his meeting with the financial advisor. But there was no escaping the reality. He was standing at a crossroads. On one side, there was the offer from Tom Cruise, a chance to rebuild, to start over. On the other side was his broken marriage, the remnants of a life he wasn't sure he could repair. As Ethan stared at the window, the sun shining brightly outside, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making the right choice. Could Tom's offer really help him rebuild, or was it just another distraction from the hard work he needed to do on himself and his marriage? The questions lingered in the air like an unanswered prayer, leaving Ethan to wonder if the path ahead was truly as clear as it seemed. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that every decision he was making lately was being driven by forces beyond his control. It was as if his life had taken a sharp turn, and now, no matter what he did, he was just trying to keep up with everything happening around him. Tom Cruise's unexpected offer, Sarah's cryptic message, and now the financial advisor's details about the $500,000. It all felt like a blur of events too big for him to comprehend. He sat up in the hospital bed, running his hands through his hair. He hadn't spoken to anyone else about what had been happening. His friends were all busy with their own lives, his family had their own issues, and he didn't want to burden them with this strange, surreal situation. Who could he talk to about accepting such a large sum of money from a celebrity? Who can understand the kind of pressure it brought? Ethan's phone buzzed again, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. "We need to figure this out, Ethan. I can't keep waiting around for you to make a decision. Let's talk tonight. I'll be there at 6 p.m. Ethan stared at the message, his stomach nodding. Sarah was coming back. After everything they had gone through, after all the hurt, she was still willing to talk. But what would they talk about? Would she even want to try again after everything that had happened? Or was this the final conversation, the one that would close the door for good? With a sigh, Ethan put his phone down and looked out the window. The hospital room was small and sterile, but outside, the world was bright and alive. It felt strange, like the world was moving forward while his own life was frozen in place. He was so caught up in his own thoughts that he barely heard the knock on the door. "Ethan, it's me," the voice on the other side said. It was Katie, his sister. Ethan hadn't seen her in days, and he realized how much he had missed her presence. She was the one person who had always been his rock, his reminder that there was still good in the world, even when everything else seemed to be falling apart. "Come in," Ethan called, not bothering to hide the exhaustion in his voice. Katie opened the door slowly, her eyes bright and concerned. She gave him a quick hug before sitting down on the edge of the bed. "How are you doing, big brother?" Ethan smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Trying to figure it all out, Katie raised an eyebrow. "What's going on? I've been getting all these weird messages about you and Tom Cruise, and I can't even keep up with the drama. So tell me, what's happening?" Ethan ran his hands through his hair again, his nerves starting to fray. "I don't know, Katie. Everything's just out of control. I don't even know where to begin." Katie reached out, placing a hand on his. "You've been through a lot, Ethan. I get it, but you're not alone in this. You've got me, and you've got Mom and Dad, but I need you to be real with me right now. What's going on with Tom Cruise and all this money?" Ethan paused, considering whether he should tell Katie everything. He had always been open with her, and right now, he needed her more than ever. He took a deep breath and explained everything. The accident, Tom's offer, the amount of money, and the pressure he was feeling. "I just don't know if I can accept this, Katie," Ethan finished. "It's not just about the money. It's the idea of someone like Tom Cruise offering me help. It feels like I don't know, like I'm a charity case or something. And then there's Sarah. I can't even think straight. She wants to talk, but I don't know if we can fix what's broken between us." Katie sat quietly for a moment, processing everything Ethan had said. Then, without a word, she took his hand in hers and squeezed it. "Ethan, listen to me. You've been knocked down, but you're not out. This offer from Tom Cruise, it's not some trick or something to make you feel small. It's a chance to get back on your feet. And don't think for one second that it's about anything other than that." Ethan looked at her, surprised by the strength in her words. "But what about Sarah? If I accept this, is it just going to make everything worse? I don't know if I can fix what's wrong between us." Katie tilted her head, studying her brother. "Look, I can't tell you what to do about Sarah, but I can tell you this. You don't have to carry this burden alone. You've been beating yourself up about your marriage for so long, but it's not just on you to fix it. It's on both of you. And if Sarah really loves you, she'll want to work through it with you. But you can't wait forever, Ethan. You have to make a choice." Ethan let her words sink in. Katie had a way of cutting through the noise, of reminding him what really mattered. Maybe she was right. Maybe he was overthinking it all. He needed to focus on getting better, on healing, physically and emotionally. But that didn't mean giving up on Sarah. It just meant taking care of himself first. The sound of a soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Ethan?" It was a nurse, looking in with a polite but professional smile. "The doctor would like to speak with you before you're discharged. Can you come down to the office for a moment?" Ethan glanced at Katie, then nodded. "Yeah, sure. I'll be right there." As he stood up, Katie gave him a quick hug. "Take care of yourself, and remember what I said. You don't have to carry this all by yourself." Ethan managed a small smile as he made his way toward the door. "Thanks, Katie. You're right. I just need to take it one step at a time." When he stepped into the hallway, his mind felt slightly clearer, but the weight of his decisions was still heavy on his shoulders. He couldn't deny that accepting Tom's offer could be a turning point, but he also couldn't ignore the fact that his marriage was falling apart. He needed to find a balance between these two worlds, recovery and repair. The doctor's office was just down the hall. As Ethan approached the door, he took a deep breath, bracing himself for the medical update. But when he opened the door, he was caught off guard. Standing in front of him, almost like a vision, was none other than Tom Cruise himself. Ethan froze in place, his heart skipping a beat. "What the hell?" "Mr. Lee," Tom said with a warm smile, his hand outstretched. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I just wanted to stop by and see how you're doing." Ethan blinked, trying to process what was happening. This was not what he expected. Tom Cruise, the Tom Cruise, was standing in front of him, in the hallway of a hospital. "Oh, hi," Ethan stammered, unsure of how to respond. Tom chuckled softly, sensing the shock. "I know this might be a bit overwhelming, but I wanted to meet you in person. I don't want you to feel like this is all happening in the background. You deserve to know that I'm here, that I'm supporting you, not just with money, but however I can help." Ethan's mind raced. Was this real? Was Tom Cruise really standing here, talking to him like he was just another person in need of help? Ethan's mind was racing, his heart thundering in his chest. Tom Cruise, the Tom Cruise, standing right in front of him, looking like a character from a movie, but with a warmth and sincerity in his eyes that made Ethan question everything he had thought about the celebrity world. Tom smiled, clearly sensing the overwhelming moment Ethan was experiencing. "I know this is a bit unexpected," he said, chuckling softly, as if trying to put Ethan at ease. "But I wanted to make sure you understood that this isn't just a business transaction or something impersonal. I wanted to meet you, see you face to face. You're not just a name on a list. I know what it's like to face challenges, and I want to make sure you're getting the support you need." Ethan stood there for a few seconds, his body frozen as he tried to process the reality of the situation. He had heard of celebrities doing charity work, but nothing like this. Nothing that came with such personal, direct involvement. This was different, and it felt strange, but strangely comforting at the same time. "Thank you," Ethan finally managed, though his voice was shaky. I didn't expect any of this. I mean, it's not every day someone like you offers to help like this." Tom's smile remained kind and genuine. "I know. I understand it's a lot to take in. But here's the thing, Ethan. You don't have to carry this alone. Whatever you're dealing with, whether it's recovery, your marriage, or just trying to make sense of it all, I want to help. I've been in tough spots myself, and I know what it's like to need a hand when you least expect it." Ethan looked up at him, still in disbelief. It was hard to imagine a man who had reached the heights of success that Tom Cruise had could be standing here, offering not just financial support, but a chance for Ethan to rebuild his life. How can you be so sure?" Ethan asked, his voice cracking a little. "I don't even know if I deserve this. I've messed up a lot, Tom. With my marriage, with my career. I feel like I'm losing everything." Tom's expression softened, and he stepped a little closer, his eyes locking with Ethan's, in a way that made him feel as if this was a moment that mattered, one that was about more than just money or fame. "You're a human being, Ethan," Tom said, his voice low but filled with empathy. "We all go through rough patches. We all make mistakes, but that doesn't mean it's the end. Sometimes we need a little help, a little nudge to remind us that we can still stand up. You don't have to be perfect. You just need to try." Ethan's chest tightened, and he felt something inside him shift, a flicker of hope, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He had been so focused on everything that was falling apart, the mess of his life, that he hadn't considered that maybe this could be the thing that helped him start fresh. Not just the money, but the realization that someone, especially someone like Tom Cruise, believed in him. "I don't know if I can ever repay you for this," Ethan said, his voice trembling with emotion. "But I don't want to let you down. Tom nodded, his eyes gleaming with understanding. You don't have to repay me, Ethan. Just take the chance. Let this be the turning point. Everything else will follow. And as for letting me down, you won't. You're taking the right step by asking for help. That's all anyone can do. Just then, the door to the hospital office opened, and the doctor stepped out, smiling. Ah, Mr. Lee, you're here, and I see you've already met Mr. Cruz, the doctor said, looking at them both with a knowing look. Ethan blinked, trying to wrap his head around the surreal moment. Yeah, we were just talking. The doctor extended his hand toward Tom. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Cruz. Thank you for your generosity. I'm sure Mr. Lee appreciates it more than words can express. Tom nodded, shaking the doctor's hand. It's the least I can do. We all have our struggles. I'm just glad I can help. As the doctor gestured for Ethan to follow him into his office, Tom patted him gently on the shoulder. I'll be here if you need anything, Ethan. We'll stay in touch. Ethan nodded, still somewhat in shock. Thank you. I thank you. With that, Tom Cruise turned and walked down the hallway, disappearing around the corner. For a few moments, Ethan stood frozen in place, trying to process what had just happened. Did that really just happen? The doctor led him into his office, and they went through the usual checkups, examining the progress of Ethan's injuries and discussing the next steps in his recovery. But through it all, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Tom, standing there with him, offering nothing but encouragement and belief in his ability to bounce back. It was more than just a gesture of financial support. It was a reminder that there was still kindness in the world, that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as far gone as he'd thought. As the meeting wrapped up and Ethan was given instructions on his physical therapy, his mind wandered back to Sarah. He hadn't heard from her since their last conversation, and the unease he had felt before was creeping back in. What would she think of everything that happened? How would she feel about his decision to accept Tom's offer? Ethan sighed, feeling a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He had so much to figure out. He wasn't sure if accepting Tom's help was the right move, or if it would just complicate things with Sarah. But one thing was certain, he had to do something. He couldn't stay stuck in the same place forever. As he left the doctor's office, he felt the weight of the choices ahead of him. But for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely alone. With Tom's help, with his family's support, and with the possibility of rebuilding his marriage, maybe he had a shot at getting things back on track. But that would require more than just accepting help. It would require action. It would require facing the hardest truths and finding the courage to move forward. His phone buzzed again as he walked down the hallway toward the exit. It was a message from Sarah. We need to talk. I'm coming over tonight. Please be ready to listen. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The moment of reckoning was approaching. Would this be the conversation that brought closure, or would it open up a new chapter, one where they could begin again? He didn't know, but he was ready to find out. As he stepped outside the hospital, the afternoon sun hit his face, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he could take the next step. Whatever it was,